There is a day, quiet, unlikely, almost always unexpected, when the world suddenly loses its meaning. There's no warning, no heavenly message, no external event that justifies it. It's just an ordinary day, so normal that no one around you would notice anything different. But inside you, something loosens, as if the inner ground that held your identity had cracked into 1,000 invisible pores. It's a day when everything that once felt solid starts to feel improvised. Conversations feel empty. Routines feel mechanical. Your identity feels borrowed. You walk through the same familiar scenery, yet you sense your soul no longer recognizes itself there. It doesn't hurt in a sharp or obvious way, but it wears you down like a conscious fog, a quiet presence that watches, questions, and disapproves. Not of the world itself, but of the way you learned to survive in it. And in that silent moment, you realize you are no longer living from spontaneity, but from conditioning, no longer vibrating, only functioning, no longer existing, only imitating. This is the day when the world loses its meaning, and, paradoxically, the day that most threatens your old self, while also being the only day that can truly set you free. This phenomenon has a name. Not spiritual in the mystical sense, but spiritual in a visceral, radical, almost biological sense of the spirit. It is called the silent collapse of the artificial self. It's the moment when the identity you built, the one made of expectations, masks, habits, and invented narratives created simply to survive, begins to crack from the inside. It's not an emotional breakdown, even though emotions overflow. It's not just an existential crisis, even though your entire existence is summoned. It is a deep inner process in which the self you thought you were enters into conflict with the self that has been quietly trying to be born for years. It is a collision of internal tectonic plates, the learned persona against the forgotten essence. You try to keep living as you always have, but every action feels like a faded copy of your own presence. Your soul begins to reject the script and reclaim the space it hasn't occupied in decades. This is its name, simple, yet severe, the day the constructed self can no longer carry the weight of its own facade. The emotional feeling of this process is intense because it blends paradoxes the body doesn't know how to handle. You feel an emptiness, but that emptiness isn't a lack, it's space being created. You feel a sense of unfamiliarity, but that unfamiliarity isn't confusion, it's the beginning of detachment. You feel something like grief, but you're not losing anything real, you're letting go of an illusion. It's like waking up inside your own life and realizing it has always been a dimly lit room where you got used to seeing everything only halfway. Suddenly, your emotions start speaking with a clarity you've never heard before, as if they had finally regained their voice after years locked in a suffocating space. And they don't ask for permission, they demand it. They demand that you acknowledge the discomfort, the exhaustion, the saturation, the collapse of everything you repressed. You realize you never truly felt at home in the character you were playing. You realize the exhaustion you carried for years wasn't a lack of strength, but a lack of authenticity. You realize the fear that always followed you wasn't fear of failing, but fear of being who you actually are. And at the same time, there's a sadness that can't be explained in words, a sadness without a face, without a story, without a narrative, as if it were a primordial echo whispering, "You lost yourself, and now you need to return." This blend of pain and revelation is the classic emotional sign of the beginning of awakening, the moment when you can no longer postpone the return to what was forgotten. What causes this internal collapse isn't bad luck, psychological instability, or personal failure. The cause is spiritual, not in a distant, mystical sense, but in the most direct, persistent, and inevitable way of your own evolution. What happens is that the frequency of your consciousness shifts quietly, without announcing the transition. What you once could tolerate becomes unbearable. What you once accepted becomes suffocating. What used to feel normal now feels false. This change isn't a choice. It's an inner calling that arrives when the soul self finally gathers enough energy to break through the shell self. It's as if your consciousness were growing inside a container that can no longer hold its size. Life isn't falling apart, it's the container that's breaking. The collapse is simply the side effect of expansion. The spiritual cause is simple and raw. You matured spiritually without noticing, and your old inner world can't keep up anymore. So the loss of meaning isn't a flaw, it's an alignment. It's your spirit trying to reposition you on the real path your soul was meant to follow. Discomfort is the doorway. Confusion is the warning. Saturation is the turning point. The void is not the end, it's the womb of your new self. Imagine living your whole life inside a theater, performing under artificial light, wearing a mask you learned to use long before you even knew you had a real face. You walk through the hallways, accept applause that isn't meant for you, repeat lines that don't come from your soul, and treat that stage as if it were your home. The artificial light blinds you, but it also keeps you warm. And you get used to it. But one day, without warning, the light fails. It doesn't burn out, it doesn't explode, it simply flickers. And in that brief moment of instability, you notice something you'd never seen before, a small crack at the back of the set. A thin, almost invisible line, glowing with a light that doesn't belong to that theater. And for the first time, you ask yourself, what if the stage isn't everything? That's the moment. The crack is the calling. The natural light leaking through it is your authentic self trying to enter. And the emotional collapse you feel is just the echo of the scenery falling apart, because it was never built to hold the truth. Your whole life, you believed your mission was to play your part well. But your soul never wanted you to perform, it wanted you to remember who you were before the performance began. And now, the stage is falling apart not to destroy you, but to set you free. On the evolutionary path of the soul, there are moments of expansion so intense that the ego can't keep up. These moments are programmed, not in a rigid or predetermined way, but energetically. As your consciousness expands, your inner structures need to be rearranged. It's like a snake shedding its skin, the process is inevitable. Every human being reaches this moment at some point in their journey, though many resist it, interrupt it, or numb themselves with distractions. But when it finds you, it doesn't matter how many strategies you try to stay in your old self, the expansion has already happened. That internal mismatch you feel is the sign that your level of consciousness shifted first, and your identity is trying to catch up. There are 3 evolutionary signs that always show up. The loss of meaning, because your old purpose can't follow the new soul. The emotional emptiness, because old emotions dissolve to make space for a new frequency. The dissolution of the persona, because it becomes too small for the being you're becoming. This process isn't punishment, destruction, or a test. It's transformation. It's a phase transition, like ice melting into water or water evaporating into vapor. It's not an ending. It's a change of state. And the more we try to stay frozen, the more painful the inevitable melting becomes. For your new self to emerge, you don't need big rituals or dramatic external changes. You only need to stop resisting what is already unfolding. A new identity isn't born through force, it's born through letting go. Letting go of control. Letting go of explanations. Letting go of the urge to understand the process while it's still taking shape. Deep spiritual guidance is simple, but it asks for courage. Do not return to what used to numb you. Do not go back to old distractions, old roles, old automatic habits. You'll need to sit with yourself, in a silence that hurts, so your new awareness can rearrange its pieces. Yes, there will be days of confusion. Yes, there will be nights when nothing feels stable. Yes, there will be a kind of grief for the versions of you that now need to die. But there will also be flashes, small, subtle, almost sacred, of a clarity you've never felt before. And these flashes are the first breaths of your new self. The new self doesn't arrive with grandeur, it arrives with precision. It doesn't arrive with certainty, it arrives with truth. It doesn't arrive with perfection, it arrives with authenticity. Allow yourself to be taken apart so you can be rebuilt. Allow yourself to be empty so you can be filled. Allow yourself to be a pause so you can become a poem. The soul knows the way. You only need to stop getting in the way. And then, when the world loses its meaning, when everything feels suspended, fragmented, quietly broken, remember this: nothing is ending, everything is beginning. The emptiness you feel is a spiritual wound. The confusion is the rite of passage. The sadness is the salt that purifies the ground for your new self. Don't run from yourself. Don't try to restore what has already run its course. Don't try to glue together the pieces of your old character. It wasn't meant to cross the doorway that has opened inside you. Breathe. Walk slowly. Treat this silence as someone who is crossing the threshold of an inner temple. Your soul is reorganizing everything. It is clearing, dissolving, emptying, and making space so you can finally live, not as an echo, but as a voice. Not as a performance, but as presence. Not as survival, but as consciousness. And if this video found you on the exact day the world lost its meaning, then maybe it isn't just a video. Maybe it's the reflection of your own rebirth calling you. If these words touched something inside you, a quiet place, forgotten but real, stay here with me. Subscribe to this space. Walk this path with us. And allow your process to keep breathing through the messages that will come to you. Because in the moment when everything falls apart, that's when you finally begin to emerge. And this journey, deep, raw, honest, does not have to be walked alone.